90 minutes. That's how long it took for Iran to do what Hamas, Hezbollah, and every other adversary has tried and failed to accomplish for 15 years. They didn't destroy the Iron Dome. They didn't hack it. They didn't jam it. They didn't develop some revolutionary counter-technology that rendered it obsolete. They just made it irrelevant through the simplest mathematics imaginable. They fired more projectiles than the system had interceptors to stop them. 300 drones launched simultaneously from positions across Iraq, Syria, and western Iran. Not 50, not 100. 300. All heading toward Israeli airspace at the same time, forcing every Iron Dome battery in the country to engage continuously until the interceptor magazines ran empty and the drones that were still in the air had nothing left to stop them. This is not a scenario that Israeli defense planners ever expected to face. This is the scenario they specifically designed their systems to prevent. And it happened anyway. March 19th, 2026. Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps launched what they called a strategic demonstration of offensive capacity. Western intelligence dismissed it as propaganda. Then the launches started, and they didn't stop. The first wave lifted off at 0300 local time. 50 Shahed 136 drones, range 2,500 kilometers, speed 185 kilometers per hour, warhead 50 kilograms, cost per unit $20,000. The second wave launched 15 minutes later, another 50 from Syria. The third wave at 0330, 60 drones from Iran. The fourth wave at 345, 70 drones. The fifth wave at 400, the final 70 drones turning west toward the Mediterranean. Israeli air defense radar detected the first wave within 2 minutes of launch. The radar picture showing 50 inbound tracks moving at low altitude, approximately 300 meters above ground level, following terrain to avoid detection until the last possible moment. Standard operating procedure for Shahed 136 operations. What wasn't standard was what happened next. The second wave appeared on radar before the first wave had even crossed into Israeli airspace. Then the third wave. Then the fourth. Israeli Air Defense Command realized within 10 minutes that this was not a normal attack profile. This was a saturation strike designed specifically to overwhelm defensive systems by forcing them to engage more targets than they had ammunition to handle. Command centers across the country were watching the same nightmare unfold in real time, radar screens filled with inbound tracks, each track representing a drone that required 2 interceptors to stop. The math was brutal and inescapable. The Iron Dome was built for short-range rockets from Gaza and Lebanon. Design parameters assumed volleys of 10 to 20 projectiles with intervals for reloading. A typical engagement sees rockets launched. Iron Dome calculates impact, fires interceptors, destroys threats mid-flight. This works because attackers cannot sustain high-volume fire indefinitely. The system was never designed for 300 projectiles arriving in coordinated waves over 90 minutes with no gaps. Each Iron Dome battery has 3 to 4 launchers with 20 interceptors per launcher. 60 to 80 interceptors per battery. Israel operates 10 batteries. Maximum capacity, 600 to 800 interceptors ready to fire. The Tamir interceptor costs $50,000 per unit. Rafael. Advanced Defense Systems manufactures approximately 2,000 per year. When the first wave crossed into Israeli airspace at 0320, Iron Dome batteries went active. Standard protocol, 2 interceptors per target for high kill probability. The drones are small, slow, predictable. Iron Dome demonstrates 90% intercept rates against similar threats. The problem wasn't technology, it was arithmetic. Wave 1, 50 drones, required 100 interceptors. Wave 2, 15 minutes later, another 100 interceptors. By Wave 3, Israeli Air Defense had expended 200 interceptors, 1/3 of total inventory, and 190 drones were still inbound. Israeli Air Defense Command made the decision at 0345 to abandon the 2 interceptor per target protocol and shift to single interceptor engagements to stretch the remaining ammunition as long as possible. This reduced the probability of kill per engagement from over 90% to approximately 70%, meaning 3 out of every 10 drones would get through even if everything else worked perfectly. The decision was tactically sound, given the constraints, but strategically it was an admission that the system was already failing. You don't reduce engagement standards because you're winning. You reduce them because you're running out of options. Wave 4, 70 drones, started crossing the border at 0410. Iron Dome batteries had already fired more than 250 interceptors. The northern batteries, the ones engaging the earliest waves, were reporting magazine depletion. Launchers that started the night with 20 interceptors each were down to 5, then 3, then empty. The battery commanders requested permission to disengage and reposition to reloading sites, but Israeli Air Defense Command denied the requests because disengaging meant leaving gaps in coverage that the remaining inbound drones would exploit. The batteries were ordered to continue engaging with whatever ammunition remained and hold position until relief units could be brought forward. The relief units didn't exist. Iron Dome is not designed for hot-swapping batteries mid-engagement. You can't rotate a fresh battery into position while drones are actively inbound because the incoming battery needs time to establish radar tracks, integrate with the command network, and calibrate fire control systems. That process takes 15 to 20 minutes under ideal conditions. The Iranian attack profile didn't allow 15 minutes between waves. It allowed 0 minutes. The drones kept coming. Wave 5 entered Israeli airspace at 0430. At this point, Israeli air defense had fired over 350 interceptors and still had 140 drones inbound. The mathematics were no longer theoretical. They were visible on radar screens across every command post in the country. The interceptor stockpile was running out faster than the drone waves were arriving. And once the interceptors were gone, there would be nothing left to stop whatever remained in the air. Israeli F-16 and F-15 fighters scrambled to intercept drones using cannon fire, an extremely inefficient use of advanced aircraft, but the only option remaining. The fighters achieved some success. Each fighter could engage 3 to 5 drones before running out of ammunition. 20 fighters airborne meant 60 to 100 drones destroyed. Useful, but not decisive when 300 drones are inbound. By 0445, Iron Dome batteries across northern and central Israel were reporting black on ammunition. Black means empty. No interceptors remaining. Launchers are still operational, radar is still tracking, fire control systems are still calculating intercept solutions, but there's nothing left to fire. The batteries continue transmitting tracking data to command centers and fighter aircraft, serving as sensor nodes rather than weapons platforms, but their primary function, intercepting incoming threats, had ended. The drones that were still airborne, approximately 80 of them at this point, continued flying toward their programmed targets with no ground-based system capable of stopping them. The targets Iran selected were not population centers. This is important to understand because it shows the attack was designed to demonstrate capability, not maximize casualties. The drones that reached their targets hit military air bases, radar installations, and logistics facilities. Nevatim Air Base in southern Israel took multiple impacts on its runway and taxiways. The damage was repairable within 48 hours, but the message was clear. If Iran had wanted to hit Tel Aviv or Haifa instead of military infrastructure, the drones that got through could have killed thousands of civilians before the alert system even warned them to take shelter. The final drone impacts occurred at 05:15, 90 minutes after the first wave launched. Israeli Air Defense Command tallied the results. Approximately 220 drones intercepted by Iron Dome and fighter aircraft. Approximately 80 drones reached their targets or crashed in unpopulated areas after exhausting their fuel. Interceptor expenditure, approximately 380 Tamir missiles at $50,000 each. Total defensive cost, $19 million. Iranian expenditure, 300 Shahed, 136 drones at $20,000 each. Total offensive cost, $6 million. The cost exchange ratio was 3-to-1 in Iran's favor. They spent $6 million to force Israel to spend $19 million, and that doesn't account for the fighters that were scrambled, the fuel they burned, the munitions they expended, and the operational tempo that pulled aircraft away from other missions. More importantly, the attack proved that Iran can deplete Israeli air defenses faster than Israel can replenish them. Rafael produces approximately 2,000 Tamir interceptors per year. Iran consumed 380 of them in 90 minutes. At that rate of expenditure, a coordinated campaign of saturation attacks could exhaust Israel's entire interceptor stockpile in less than a week. The Israeli government's public statement described the attack as a failure. They emphasized the high intercept rate, the minimal casualties, and the rapid restoration of damaged facilities. What they didn't mention was the interceptor depletion, the fact that multiple batteries went black during the engagement, or the uncomfortable reality that if Iran had launched 500 drones instead of 300, or if they had targeted cities instead of air bases, the outcome would have been catastrophic. Those details remained classified because acknowledging them publicly would undermine the deterrence narrative that Israeli air defenses are impenetrable. Behind closed doors, Israeli defense officials are having very different conversations. The conversations about what happens when the next attack comes before the interceptor stockpiles are replenished. About what happens when Iran coordinates drone swarms with ballistic missiles and cruise missiles simultaneously, forcing Iron Dome to compete for targets with Arrow and David's sling systems. About what happens when Hezbollah in Lebanon and militias in Syria and Iraq all launch their own drone swarms in support of an Iranian strike, creating a multi-axis saturation scenario that no combination of defensive systems can handle. The mathematical problem is unsolvable with current technology and current stockpiles. Israel cannot manufacture interceptors faster than Iran can manufacture drones. The production timelines don't allow it. Rafael can build 2,000 Tamir interceptors per year if they run production lines at maximum capacity. Iran can build 10,000 Shahed 136 drones per year using the same industrial output, and they're getting components and technical assistance from Russia, which has its own drone production infrastructure that dwarfs anything Israel can match. The defender's advantage in precision and technology does not compensate for the attacker's advantage in volume and cost. Iranian military doctrine has clearly adapted to this reality. The IRGC is not trying to defeat Iron Dome through superior technology. They're defeating it through superior mathematics. Build more drones than the defender has interceptors. Launch them in waves that arrive faster than the defender can reload. Accept losses of 70 to 80% because the 20 to 30% that get through are still enough to achieve strategic effects. This is not a new concept. This is basic military theory about attrition warfare applied to modern air defense. The attacker doesn't need to destroy the defensive system. The attacker just needs to make the defensive system run out of ammunition. Israel's options are limited. Option 1, build more interceptors faster. This takes years and billions and only delays the problem because Iran can expand drone production faster and cheaper. Option 2, develop cheaper interceptors. Israel is funding research into directed energy weapons like lasers that engage drones for dollars per shot instead of $50,000 per missile. Those systems won't be ready until 2028 or later. Option 3, shift to offensive strategy. Destroy launch sites before drones take off. This requires persistent surveillance and rapid strike capability against mobile launchers hidden in civilian areas. Option 4, accept that air defense cannot stop saturation attacks and focus on hardening infrastructure and expanding shelters. This is an admission that defensive systems cannot handle today's threat environment. The Iranian attack on March 19th was not an isolated experiment. It was a proof of concept that Iran can now execute at will whenever they calculate the strategic benefit outweighs the cost of the drones expended. And the cost is trivial. $6 million to deplete 20% of Israel's interceptor stockpile and force a strategic conversation about the viability of air defense doctrine is an extraordinary return on investment. The next attack will likely be larger, more coordinated, and targeted with greater precision based on what Iranian intelligence learned from observing Israeli defensive responses during this engagement. Israeli military planners are now operating under the assumption that the 300-drone attack was a baseline, not a ceiling. Intelligence assessments suggest Iran has stockpiled thousands of Shahed 136 drones and can surge production if they decide to commit to a sustained campaign. The nightmare scenario that keeps Israeli defense officials awake is a coordinated strike, where Iran launches 1,000 drones simultaneously, while Hezbollah fires 500 rockets from Lebanon, and Iraqi militias fire another 200 drones from the east. That scenario would overwhelm every defensive system Israel operates, drain interceptor stockpiles to zero within hours, and leave the country defenseless against follow-on strikes using more sophisticated weapons like cruise missiles and ballistic missiles. This is not theoretical wargaming. This is the operational reality that defense planners are preparing for right now. And there is no defensive architecture currently available that can stop it. The strategic takeaway from the 90-minute engagement is not that Iron Dome failed. The system performed exactly as designed. The takeaway is that the threat environment has evolved beyond what the system was designed to handle, and no amount of technological improvement can overcome the fundamental arithmetic of cheap attackers versus expensive defenders. When your adversary can build 10 attack drones for the price of one defensive interceptor, and they have the industrial capacity to sustain high-volume production indefinitely, the defender loses. Not eventually, immediately. The only question is how long it takes for everyone to realize the outcome is already determined. Share this video because the official narrative is still claiming Israeli air defenses are functioning as intended. They're showing you intercept footage and success rates. They're not showing you the empty interceptor magazines, the batteries that went black, and the strategic calculation that just shifted permanently in Iran's favor. Both are true. Only one explains what happens when the next wave launches and there are no interceptors left to stop it.